Hey everybody, welcome back to the SuperBake podcast. I'm your host, Baker. Let's talk about stuff. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Apologies for not posting any episodes recently. Still got some stuff going on in my personal life that I'm still dealing with, but it does look like things are starting to wind down now, so hopefully I'll be able to get back to a more normal podcast schedule here soon. I'm hoping to get back to at least weekly, or if not bi-weekly now. So yeah, things are getting better there. They're getting less stressful. So, good news on that front. For today's episode, I wanted to talk about a few different things. I'm going to get my thoughts on the anime series Pluto on Netflix. I also want to talk about some rumors I've been hearing about Xbox in the gaming industry. Just some things that you guys have probably heard about as well. Kind of give my thoughts on that. And then also give my thoughts on the trailer for the upcoming movie, A Quiet Place Day 1. Kind of give my thoughts on that one as well. So first off, I'll just dive right into the anime series Pluto on Netflix. This released October 26th of last year. 8 episode long. And it was from I believe it was based off a manga series by Naoki Urasawa, who I believe, if I'm not mistaken, was the same person who did the manga series for Monster. If you haven't seen that series or checked it out yet, definitely watch the anime. I highly recommend it. It has one of the best, in my opinion, one of the best villains, not just in anime, but in probably cinema, Johann Liebert. Truly terrifying Hannibal Lecter-esque villain. So this isn't going to be a super in-depth review of that series, just going to kind of be my general thoughts on it. But and I'm probably going to butcher a lot of names in this series, so sorry about that. But basically, to summarize the plot of the story, the plot follows a robot detective named Gesicht, I think it's how you say his name, Gesicht, who is investigating a series of murders that are taking place around the world. Basically, these super advanced robots are getting killed off by some unknown force. And he is trying to figure out who's doing it, like what's behind it, what's causing it, what their motives are. But what's interesting about the murders that take place is that they are murders or the people that are killed, the victims, are other robots. And they're like the most powerful robots in the world, essentially. Also considered weapons of mass destruction. And my understanding is the story is based off of a story arc from the old Astro Boy manga series. And you can tell when you look at it, you can definitely tell like the character designs borrow from that classic Astro Boy design. There's even a character in the show called Adam, who I think is supposed to be basically Astro Boy. You can kind of tell from like his hairstyle and stuff like that. You can also tell that this is from the same person who did the show or the anime series Monster, because the designs of the characters definitely look very much like the same character designs from that one. So immediately I kind of knew right from there that this was from that same creator. This anime series, I didn't know a whole lot about it going into it, and I had a very different idea of what it was going to be when I first saw the trailer for it. So I went into this thinking that it was going to be an action anime series. And there is a little bit of that, but it's not what I would call like your typical like shonen anime series at all. Number one, it's very short. It's only like 8 episodes, but each episode is fairly long. Each episode feels like kind of a short movie. I think each episode was roughly about an hour, like between 50 to 60 minutes. Some of them I think were even longer than that. So each one does feel like, quite a bit to watch. But what I didn't get what I thought I was going to get out of this, but I got something, in my opinion, that was even better. So I guess one thing I would say about this anime series is that it's more of a political thriller / I guess there's some elements of horror in there as well. It's kind of a mystery, like a murder mystery, like with the detective, with Gesicht, trying to figure out who's behind the murders of both the robots and also any humans that are associated with the robots. A lot of the story is told from the perspective of the robot characters, like Adam, Gesicht, and like the other 7 robots that were involved in like this great war that took place years before the current plot of the story. So each episode we kind of get introduced to each different robot, who they are, kind of what they did in the past. And we also get to see like their encounter with the antagonist of the story, which I'm not going to tell you who the antagonist is because it is kind of a big reveal for it. And I do think I would recommend going into this show and just finding out for yourself what happens. I just think you'll get more out of it that way. But you do get introduced to kind of like each of the 7 powerful robots that are kind of like the targets of the antagonist in this series. One thing I do want to note about this show is overall, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was, number one, very well animated, way better than I was expecting a show like this on Netflix to be, for sure. Especially since, from what I've heard, I think Netflix has been kind of gutting their animation lately, like in terms of like its budget. So this is definitely one of the better looking, like traditionally 2D animated series that I've seen in a long time, especially on a platform like Netflix. But one thing I'll definitely say about this show is, if nothing else, in terms of atmosphere and story, this show rules. I think it was episode 2. I don't remember the name of the episode, but it's where we're introduced to one of the robots named North Number 2, I think is his name. And he wears this long cloth to cover up like these weapons that he's got all over his body. And he is basically charged with being like the caretaker of this blind old man who is a famous pianist. And North Number 2 wants to learn how to play the piano, even though he's a war machine. The whole episode, in my opinion, is one of the most beautiful anime episodes that I think I've ever seen. It was such a great story, and it felt like its own self-contained story. And you learn more about like North Number 2 and kind of what he did in the past, and as well as the pianist, and you learn about his tragic past too, like how he became blind, his family history, and things like that. And it is such a beautiful episode because you see North Number 2. He wants to learn how to play the piano, even though the old man keeps telling him that he can't because he's a weapon of destruction. And it is. I don't want to talk about it too much more than that because it is such a fantastic episode. That episode alone, I think, makes this series worth watching. It's because it's only about an hour long, it kind of feels like its own self-contained story where you could watch it and obviously there is an overarching plot, of course, but it almost kind of made me think of like, and I don't know why, it made me think of the anime Magnetic Rose from the anime series Memories, which is such a fantastic anime. This kind of made me think of that in a way, not necessarily because the plot is the same. The plots are completely different, obviously. But just that it's such a short story, but man, it is so compelling. The other episodes of the show are also done very well too, but I think episode 2 specifically stood out to me about that show. I really enjoyed that. To me, it was such a beautiful, well-told, well-written story with just fantastic voice acting from both the main characters. And we only spend time with these 2 side characters, and they're never introduced in the story ever again. But man, they left such an impact on me. One thing I will definitely say about this anime series is, like I said, I went into this expecting a little bit more action, and instead I got more of a murder mystery thriller. So that would kind of be my, I guess, I don't want to call it a warning, but I would definitely say that would kind of be what I would say going into this is kind of know what to expect from it. If you're expecting a lot of action and fight scenes, you might be a little bit disappointed. There really isn't much in the way of action in this show. In fact, most of the action takes place off screen. We don't really see the main robots when they fight the antagonist that comes after them. It happens off screen. But what I think the series does well enough is it gives you an idea of, one, just how powerful these robots are supposed to be because they're weapons of mass destruction, essentially, and also, two, how powerful the antagonistic force that they're fighting is as well. So it's definitely an interesting like murder mystery that takes place and evolves over the course of the story. And once you kind of learn like what the threat actually is, it definitely goes into pretty weird territory, almost like kind of psychological in a way. Again, I don't want to go into that too much. I just recommend checking it out. This is going to be a very short review. Basically, my final thoughts on Pluto is it's fantastic. I definitely recommend checking it out. If you have Netflix, if you're still subscribed to it, I definitely recommend checking it out. I think it's completely worth it. And like I said, if for nothing else, I think episode 2 of the series is wonderful. And also, I'm just going to use this to just also recommend the anime series Monster as well. I don't remember how long that series is, but it's from the same creator as this one, and it's fantastic. Like I said, Johann Liebert is a fantastic antagonist, so if you like Pluto, I definitely recommend checking out Monster as well. I think they're both on Netflix, if I'm not mistaken, so both fantastic anime series. You won't be disappointed. So now I want to talk about the situation with Xbox. So recently, I saw an article saying that I guess apparently they announced that several games that essentially were exclusive titles might now be available on the PlayStation 5 and potentially the Switch in the coming future. One of the things that I had heard was that potentially Gears of War might be available on the PlayStation 5 at some point, along with other exclusive titles, like I think the new Indiana Jones. There was an article that supposedly Starfield might be coming to PlayStation 5 as well. And I know that they were talking about Hi-Fi Rush being available on the Switch and the PlayStation 2 at some point. I don't know if they are yet. I thought that was very interesting. Man, I don't know how I feel about this. I know there's been a lot of speculation from a lot of fans, a lot of, Microsoft fans saying that, they're concerned because maybe this, like, what does this mean, basically? I think that's where the speculation is this a sign that Xbox is potentially shutting down? Are they stepping away from the gaming industry? I haven't really done a whole lot of research into this. I will say it is interesting for sure. The idea of Halo or Gears of War, games that have been an Xbox exclusive for as long as I can remember, like since I was in high school, I don't know. That's hard to wrap my head around. On the one hand, I mean, I guess it's cool because from my perspective, I'm somebody who has a PlayStation 5 and a Nintendo Switch. I have not had an Xbox console in a very long time. The last one I had was the 360. It crapped out on me, and then I switched to a PlayStation 3, and from there I've owned a PlayStation ever since. I mean, I'm not like a Sony fanboy or anything like that. It's just, I've had, knock on wood, I've had good luck with PlayStation consoles. They've had a lot of good exclusive games that I've enjoyed over the years, so that's just kind of what I've stuck with. And of course, the Switch, I would argue, is probably Nintendo's best console in many years, probably at least since the GameCube. So, and I think if I remember correctly, I thought I read somewhere that the Switch is on track to surpass the PlayStation 2 in terms of sales, so like units sold. So, it's hard to argue with numbers. I know recently it seems like Xbox has been kind of struggling with exclusive titles. I know Redfall I think it was a Game Pass exclusive. I don't think it did very well. I remember seeing some reviews for it, and it got pretty much destroyed by critics and from the general public too. I don't know if they fixed that recently. Starfield, I don't think got the best reviews. I mean, I don't think people are calling it awful, but I think what I keep hearing about Starfield is that it feels outdated. It feels like Bethesda, hasn't really changed a lot of their older models for their formulas for games, and they probably really need to. So, I mean, I'm interested in Starfield for sure. It was definitely a title that I was interested in. I just, I wasn't willing to fork over the cash to buy a Xbox Series X or S or whatever it's called just to play a couple of games. Like the main titles on the Xbox I was interested in are Starfield, Hi-Fi Rush. I haven't really been into Halo in a long time. I was interested in the new Indiana Jones, but I mean, I don't know. We'll see about that one. Maybe if that one's on sale. If it comes to the PlayStation, I might pick it up. But it does raise an interesting question, though, because now I think what a lot of people are asking is, well, what's the point of owning an Xbox if I can just play all of their exclusive titles on a PlayStation 5, And from the perspective of, somebody who owns a PlayStation 5, it kind of feels like I made the right choice because, number one, the PlayStation still has exclusive titles that are not going to be available on the Xbox, like Spider-Man, God of War, things like that. So now if like all these titles on the Xbox, if I can just play them on the PlayStation 5, then why bother getting an Xbox? So I don't know. I think the CEO of Xbox is supposed to make some kind of business update this upcoming week, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So I guess time will tell, and we'll have to see like what he says on that. But I know a lot of people have been speculating, like, and pretty understandably, there's concerns that this might be a potential sign that Xbox is going to go under. I don't see that happening. Like, Xbox has been around. I think the first console came out like what in like the mid 2000s, mid to late 2000s or something like that. I think I was in early high school when when the first one came out, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe mid high school. I can't remember. But it's been like 15 years, around 15 years or something like that. And I don't know, like they're such a big, well-known name in the gaming industry. Like I remember like it used to be like Nintendo and Sega were the two biggest names in gaming, and now it's kind of like Sony and Microsoft kind of, butting heads against each other, and then Nintendo is kind of off in their own little world doing their own thing, and it's been, paying off for them quite a bit. But the Switch, I think, was already kind of outdated even when it first came out compared to like the PS4 and the Xbox One. And now, of course, with the PS5 and the new Xbox console, the Switch is definitely outdated. Of course, there's rumors about a Switch 2 potentially coming here soon. But yeah, I don't know. I don't personally believe that Xbox is going to just simply disappear. I mean, number one, it's part of Microsoft, and Microsoft is such a huge company. They've got their hands in many different projects and stuff like that. So I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know, like, obviously we're not going to know anything until Microsoft or somebody high up at Xbox, like the CEO, officially confirms something. So, but I don't see it disappearing. I know one thing I've read is that they are potentially moving to more like digital media, so like more software rather than hardware. So maybe what we'll see potentially is that they may stop developing consoles, like physical consoles. I know that's one thing that I think they're wanting to move away from is like physical games. Like instead of having the discs, you would buy a digital copy of it, which does seem like that's where the market's kind of trending towards. I know a lot of games that I have for the PlayStation 5 I own digitally, like Psychonauts 2, for example. I have the digital copy of that. The Final Fantasy VII Remake, the Baldur's Gate 3, I own the digital copy of that. A lot of my games actually on the PlayStation 5 are digital copies. All my games for the Switch are physical. But yeah, like I would say probably at least half the games I have on my PlayStation 5 are probably digital copies. So I know that was one rumor that was circulating, was that potentially Microsoft or Xbox was probably going to move more towards like digital copies of video games, where like you would play games like through Game Pass or something like that. But I don't know how that's going to work without a physical console. I mean, I know it can be done. It's hard to picture Game Pass on like the Switch or the PS5. It just feels weird. So I don't know. I don't know how that's going to play out. But if I had to guess, I would say that probably what is most likely going to happen is we're probably just going to see them evolve and change in terms of their place in the gaming industry. So, I mean, who knows? I mean, maybe the Xbox console, like the physical console, might disappear, but I don't see Xbox suddenly just disappearing from the gaming industry. They're such a big name. I don't see that happening. I think what probably is most likely going to happen is they're just going to change their business model and probably just kind of change how they operate in terms of like the games they develop. Maybe operate as more of like a third party, game licensing company or developer or something like that. I see that being more likely the situation instead of them just disappearing. So, but it is interesting though. It kind of almost seems like now Nintendo is maybe potentially coming in to take the second place next to PlayStation, and maybe Xbox is third place. I don't know. I guess time will tell. Like I said, we'll have to see like what they say this week, if they make any formal announcement as far as like what their plans are for the future. I'm not going to speculate on that, but I will just say I don't see this as a sign that Xbox is disappearing. I think they're just going to change and evolve into something different. So we'll just have to see how that plays out. Okay, and now I'm going to talk about the trailer that just released for A Quiet Place Day 1. I had heard rumors that they were working on a potential third movie, but I thought it was going to be a sequel to A Quiet Place Part 2. I didn't know it was going to be a prequel. This one looks like it's actually going to take place on the day that the creatures from the first two movies actually show up on Earth. Looks like the movie stars Jaimin Hansu and Lupita Nyong'o as the main protagonists. It looks like this one takes place in the city, which is an interesting change of place from what we saw in the first two movies. The first two mostly take place, like, I think the first one was on the farm with John Krasinski and his family, and then the second one is kind of more like in a rural area. But this one looks like it's going to be mostly in the city, which I think is going to be. I'm cool with that because I think that will make it's interesting to see like how the aliens will, how the change in environment will affect them, being around like steel and concrete as opposed to like a wooded area and things like that. I really like the first two. I personally think the first one is probably a little bit better than the sequel, but I still love the sequel. A Quiet Place Part 2 is great. Both really interesting movies with an interesting premise and very well acted. I know the first one was written and directed by John Krasinski. I don't remember if the second one was directed by him. I know he was heavily involved in it though. I think he co-wrote this movie. I don't believe he's the director though. I may look that up. But I gotta say, watching the trailer for it, I'm immediately stressed out for the cat in the trailer that Lupita has. All I can say is that cat better survive the movie. Okay, Michael Sarnowski is the director of this. Okay, and he co-wrote it with John Krasinski. All right, gotcha. Interesting. Oh, produced by Michael Bay. Didn't know that. I wonder if he was involved with the other two. I'm not sure. Yeah, I saw the trailer the trailer. I saw the cat in the trailer, and I kept thinking like nothing better happened to the damn cat. But yeah, we don't get a whole lot from the trailer. We basically just see like the initial, like the meteors coming down to the planet, which I'm not sure if that's supposed to be the alien ships or just maybe like asteroids they arrive on. I'm not really sure on that. One thing that we definitely see in this is it looks like there's a lot more of the creatures than there were in the previous ones. Like in the first one, we really only see like a handful of them, and then we get, I feel like the second one had about the same amount. We see like a handful of them. We don't really get to see them in groups. Mostly they kind of seem to operate on their own, but this one we actually see them moving in packs. There's one part in the trailer where we see like Jaimin Hansu, he finds Lupita, as she wakes up and he's trying to stop her from making noise, and then they look out a window and they see like just what sounds like hundreds of them just running by, almost like a stampede. And like we've seen like what one of these creatures can do in the first movie, so the idea of there being like just hundreds of them running around, that could be really scary. And I also like the idea of the added complication that the aliens present in the fact that you cannot make a sound because they have ultra hearing. So if you make even one little sound, they can come after you. So, and what's interesting about this is that unlike in the first two films take place well after the aliens show up. So like we see like in the first movie, like John Krasinski's character, like his family has a whole system for how they avoid detection from the aliens. Like they have like that little sand path they create so they can go into town, get supplies like food, medicine, whatever they need, without making too much noise. And they walk around barefoot for the most part because, again, their bare feet are quieter than like if they wear shoes. And even in their house, like you see them, like they have the way they set up their house, even though it kind of raises the question, where's the electricity coming from? But whatever, you kind of have to suspend your disbelief a little bit there. But like, they use cloth for like board games instead of like pieces, like plastic pieces, They try to cook everything in a specific way so it doesn't make too much noise, including like washing their clothes, things like that. They try to make a soundproof room. Like they've altered their way of living so that the aliens don't hear them and then come get them. But in this movie, the people don't know anything about that. So when the aliens show up, that means the humans are basically going to be running around, screaming, panicking, which is basically going to make things worse. Like their instincts are going to be the thing that's probably going to get them killed. So it's going to be, that is one aspect of the story that I'm really interested in seeing, is like how the humans figure out like that the aliens have super hearing. We see it when Jaimin saves Lupita, he tells her to be quiet. Like he doesn't tell her, but he gives her like the hand motion. So clearly his character seems to know that the aliens have super hearing. So I'm curious to see like, are we going to see this from like his perspective? Is it going to be simply from Lupita's perspective, or is it going to be kind of a mix of the two? I'm very curious to see that. One shot of the movie that I also really like too is when they're inside this building and you see like dozens of the aliens climbing down this skyscraper to get in there. Because we've seen how powerful these things are. Like they can basically throw cars around and stuff like that. So I think it's definitely going to make for some very interesting and tense moments in this movie. It's actually one thing I kind of noticed, like kind of a interesting connection between this and the second film. was in the second film, we got to see John Krasinski's character when the aliens first show up when he goes into town to the baseball game. And we get a very brief glimpse of like the aliens running amok through the town. This movie seems like it's going to be that, but like on a much wider scale. Particularly what made me think of that was when it shows Lupita's character in the street and when she's trying to hide under a vehicle from the creatures, and then this guy tries to get under the car with her, and that's when one of the aliens gets him. So it definitely seems like they're kind of going for bigger in this movie, which has me a little nervous if I'm being honest. You know, I always kind of get nervous when movies do that. It kind of feels like every entry has to be a little bit bigger. You know, like now it's like it's more aliens. It's, you know, it's in the city, it's more people, more victims, more destruction. And we definitely see that in this. Like we see there's a part where the military gets involved. They send in jets and it looks like a big chunk of the city's on fire. So I'm assuming that they bomb the city to try to contain the aliens and take them out, which would make sense. And it would explain like why we see so few of them in the other two films. Like maybe they destroy them with weapons, you know, and then a lot of them just run away. So it's got me interested. I think it releases in June, I believe. So that's something else that kind of has me a little bit nervous about this too. June 28th of this year, yeah. So I did not know about this movie specifically. I had not heard anything about it, and we're only a few months away, so that has me a little nervous. It was kind of the same thing with the new Exorcist film. I didn't see a trailer for that until I went to go see the movie Oppenheimer just a couple months before The Exorcist Believer came out, and that movie was awful. So hopefully this is good. I don't know if I'll check this out in theaters, but if it's on streaming, maybe I'll watch it. I'm not really sure about that. We'll just, we'll have to wait and see. But I will definitely say this trailer has got me pretty pumped for it. So definitely excited to see it for sure. So if I do, I'll definitely be sure to leave my thoughts on here for sure. All right, everyone. I think that's going to conclude this episode of the podcast. Once again, if you like what you heard, I am on Anchor, Spotify, and YouTube. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll catch you all next time. Later.